Alrighty. Okay, so my name is Susan Ibach, and what I'll be doing today is taking you through sort of Microsoft Certification 101. Sometimes when you start looking at getting certified, it can be a bit overwhelming when you see the long list of certifications and the different exams. So what I wanted to do here today was sort of walk you through that and give you a plan of attack. So just so you know who I am, my name is Susan Ibach. I actually work for Microsoft Canada, and I have a title of Technical Evangelist. It's an interesting title, and my cat has decided to come over and talk to me, so if you hear meowing, that's my cat. And as a technical evangelist, basically my responsibility is, marketing teams go off, and when new products come out, they explain things to consumers. But it's a little different as a technical person trying to understand the latest technology that Microsoft comes out with. So as a technical evangelist, my team is basically responsible for helping make sure people understand the latest technologies. And when I say helping people understand, specifically I mean helping technical people understand the implications of the latest technologies. So it's a really interesting role because I get to stay on top of the latest technologies. And another aspect I feel very strongly about is certification. So that's why I'm talking to you here today. If you do have any questions after this presentation, I do have a hard stop at 1 o'clock, but there's my email address. Feel free to shoot me questions after the fact, and there's my Twitter handle as well, Hockey Geek Girl. And yes, that is an Ottawa Senators jersey in that photo. I am a Sens fan, and yes, I am not happy about the lockout. I miss my hockey. So what are we going to do in this session? What we're going to do is help you figure out what the certifications are that make sense for your existing skills and help you identify resources you can use to help you actually prepare for a certification exam, and even give you a few strategies to help you be more successful when you take that first exam. So my goal is at the end of this session, you will be able to choose an appropriate certification, know what exam you should take, or at least where to look it up, and be able to prepare for and take your first step towards getting Microsoft certification. And I'm going to move my cat because he's being a cat. Sorry, cat doesn't usually walk around and yell on me. He's in a mood today. All right, so really, all of you out there, anybody working with technology, we all want to have a successful career. And getting certified, one thing I'll say, I don't think getting certified guarantees you a job. Sometimes people will ask me that. No, but I do think getting certified builds your skills. The number of times I've prepared for an exam and had to study some material for content that I didn't know before. Maybe it was SQL Server, and there were certain parts of SQL querying I was very comfortable with. But then to pass the exam, maybe I had to study up on geospatial data. I'm like, oh gosh, I don't know anything about geospatial. So it's required for the exam. And then I'm amazed how often, 6 months later, I'll get asked a question and I can say, actually, you can do that with this product. I remember learning that when I took the exam. Or when I'm studying for the exam itself, I discover something and go, oh my gosh, I didn't know that feature existed. If I had known that 6 months ago, it would have saved me a week of work. So there is no question that going through the certification process will build your skills because it's going to allow you to broaden your knowledge of the product. The other thing that certification definitely does do is it shows your employer or a potential employer that you're somebody who's taking the initiative to keep up with technology. There's so much happening in the high-tech space. Imagine, being a manager and trying to hire somebody. I may be hiring you now to manage Server 2008, but I know that Server 2012 is on the horizon, and I'm assuming that someday there'll be a Server 2015 or 2016 that'll come out as well. One sure thing about technology is it's changing. So when you're someone who has a certification, it's a way of showing the manager you're keeping up with technology, and that way you'll be a resource to that manager on what's coming and what are the advantages and helping them plan when to move over to the latest technologies and how to make the most of them when they move to those technologies. It's a great way to show your initiative. Now what's really awesome is that you already know a lot. You've worked with different products, whether it's coding or databases or networking. So you already have a lot of knowledge about different technologies. So what I'm going to try and do today is help you understand how you take that knowledge and actually turn it into certification. There's basically 4 steps you want to follow. Number 1, figure out what certification you're going to go after. Number 2, find the gaps in your knowledge to get that certification. There's no point in restudying what you already know. You want to be effective. You want to spend your time filling in the gaps, finding out what you don't know. And then step 3 becomes filling those gaps in your knowledge so that you'll be able to pass that exam. Then you're ready to go take the exam. So 4 simple steps, and I'm going to walk you through resources for each of those 4 steps here today. So your first step is just to pick a suitable certification goal. So what I'd like you to just think about for a second is look at these 3 sentences and think about which one best describes you. Are you somebody who has hands-on experience with a product and likes to use a product? Or are you more of a designer architect who's really designing solutions using a particular product? Or are you the guy or girl, the guru on a particular product? Do you want to be seen as a complete and total expert? Your answer to that question helps you determine what's the right target certification level, because there are different certification levels you can get from Microsoft. The first level is the associate level, and that's for somebody who just works with the product day in, day out. It's a great certification to start with. It shows that you know how to use a product. The expert level certifications are really more aimed at somebody who's a bit more of a designer, architect, who's going to be designing solutions using a product. And that's sort of the expert level. That's where the MCSE, which is probably the best known of the Microsoft certifications, that's considered an expert level certification. There is another level as well called the master certification. And this one is really for someone who's going to become an absolute deep dive guru. Now, you'll notice the size of the boxes in this pyramid. Those are meaningful. There are more people out there who have associate. There are a fair number of people who have expert. There are not a lot of people out there who have the master certification. It's not easy to get. So let's take a look at each of these certification levels in a little bit more detail and talk about it from a more technology-specific aspect. But these are 3 basic goal levels you go for. Associate, I know how to use a product. Expert, I can design a solution with the product. Or master, I am the guru on this particular product. Now, regardless of what you have chosen as a final goal, to be the master, to be the expert, you should always start with the associate exams, because there's always going to be a prerequisite of having the associate level certification before you move up that pyramid. So everybody, when they start certification, starts with associate exams. The associate certifications and exams really demonstrate that you have a knowledge of how to work with the product. So you're going to get a lot of questions about what property should you set to do X, or where do you go in the tool to do the following. A lot of questions about how you do things, what different properties are for. In code, you might get code syntax type questions. Some of the better known acronyms for these certifications are the MCSA, or Microsoft Certified Solution Associate. That is the certification you'd be going for on, say, Windows Server 2012 or Server 2008 or Windows 7 or Windows 8, and it'll require passing 2 to 3 exams to get an associate level certification. There's also an MCTS, Microsoft Certified Technical Specialist. Now, some of the MCTS exams, these are the older exams, if you will, from previous versions of the products, where there is no MCSA available yet. So some of these exams are retiring in July 2013. That doesn't mean the certification expires. That just means the exams expire. So if you want to get an MCTS, you have to make sure you have all the exams done by July 2013. If you look them up on the website, microsoftlearning.com, then you can easily check an individual exam to see if it's going to be retired or not, just so you know. Getting an MCTS requires 1 or 2 exams. And they are very much focused on how to use the product, what are different commands for, what are different properties for. If you decide you want to go to that expert level of certification, go for that MCSE, for example, Microsoft Certified Solutions Expert. MCSE, just for the record, it used to stand for Microsoft Certified Solutions Engineer. They kept the acronym when they brought the MCSE back, but it has been rebranded a little bit as Microsoft Certified Solutions Expert. I don't know if it's because of the whole engineer word being reserved by professional engineers. I have no idea, but the acronym has actually changed. But we still know it and love it as the MCSE. So the MCSE is actually one of the expert level certifications. And you can get an MCSE on desktop, so that would be, your Windows 7, Windows 8 type stuff. On server, you can get it on private cloud. This is actually a new one that just came out, and it's gaining some serious popularity because of the key aspects of virtualization. That's going to cover things like Hyper-V. SQL Server, messaging, SharePoint, communication, so that might include things like Lync. Then the older version of the MCSE, what we had until this year, was the MCITPs, Microsoft Certified Information Technology Professionals. And these are also expert-level certifications, but they tend to be sort of on the last version of the product because these are the certifications that came out about 2 to 3 years ago. That's where you'll find Windows 7, Server 2008, SQL Server 2008, Exchange 2007, and so on. Gradually, these are being replaced by MCSEs. On the programming side, if you're a developer, then the current certification at the expert level is the MCSD, Microsoft Certified Solution Developer. And there is an MCSD out there already for the Windows Store, which is how to build apps for Windows 8. And there's one out there already for web applications, which has always been probably the most popular of the developer certifications. There is also the MCPD, Microsoft Certified Professional Developer Certification as well. And that is, again, more sort of Visual Studio 2008, 2010 certifications on developing Windows, developing web, and developing for Azure. A number of these certifications, the exams will be retired in 2013 as well. Again, that doesn't mean the certification expires. It simply means if you want to get one of those MCPD certifications, you have to have all the exams done by July 2013 because you can't take the exams after that date. If you like that idea of becoming the guru, you want to be, an independent consultant, or you want to rise in the company as a technical absolute guru on a product, the go-to person, then there is a strategy of going for the master's certification. This is absolutely a premium certification. I know hundreds and hundreds of people who have associate level. I know dozens and dozens of people who have expert certification. I can count on my hand the number of people I know with a master's designation. And those are people, and despite the fact that I work with a number of people who are very technically savvy. So the master's really is a premium certification. It has very high value. To get a master's, you'll need an expert level as a prerequisite. To get an expert, you can need an associate as a prerequisite. And in addition to that, you either have to take a 2 to 3 week course or study on your own, equivalent to basically 2 to 3 weeks worth of course material. So there's a lot of material to study. You learn a lot by going through this process. And then you have to prove you've mastered the content by doing a knowledge exam as well as a lab exam. So this is a really premium certification, not one, a nice one to be aware of, but if we're doing a certification 101, not where you want to start out. Just so you know, currently they offer the master's certifications at Exchange, Lync, SharePoint, SQL Server, and Windows Server. So not all products offer the master's certification, just the big ones. So the trick is to start with associate. So what you need to do is find the associate certification that best matches your current existing skills. What do you work with every day? So these are the MCSA and MCTS certifications. So what you do is you go to Microsoft.com/learning and you can get a list of all the MCSA certifications or all the MCTS certifications. So I'm going to take you through some of the ones you might be interested in depending on the technology you're working with every day. So the first one you see here is if you're working with Windows Server. Well, if you're working with 2012 or looking at that certification, I'd recommend you go after the MCSA for Windows Server, and you'd start with probably exam 7410. It's a basic installing and configuring exam, so it's generally considered, I won't say it's easy, but it's one of the easier exams to start with in the Windows Server track. If you are working with Server 2008, most people find the Active Directory exam a good place to start, and that exam is the 7640. If you're more of a client desktop person, there's a Windows 8 exam on how to configure Windows 8 if you're trying to stay on top of the latest and greatest. And there's also a Windows 7 configuring exam that's extremely popular as well. And that would be the first exam towards getting a desktop certification. If you work with Exchange, I'd recommend you start with the configuring exam, which is the 7662. If you work with SharePoint, You probably want to start with the SharePoint configuring exam. If you are a SharePoint developer, there are separate certification tracks for the SharePoint developer versus the SharePoint administrator. In SQL Server for 2012, I would recommend you start off with the basic querying exam. So, you know, your basic select statements, insert, updates, joins. You probably know a lot of that already. For 2008, it would be the installation and maintenance exam most likely you'd be starting with. In Visual Studio, you'd probably start, a very popular exam is the Web Applications exam. A lot of people working with ASP.NET inside Visual Studio, so that's a very popular place to start. If you are a web developer in particular, for 2010, said the 515 Web Applications exam. If you are getting into the world of app development, with Windows 8 being out there, we do have the ability now to build apps. There is actually an exam on programming in C# and an exam for programming in HTML5 with JavaScript, because you can build Windows apps in either HTML5 JavaScript or using C#. So you can choose the technology you want, and then the subsequent exams grill you more on the Windows 8. These ones are purely about the languages, so they're nice and easy to start with because they don't require you to master the Windows 8 technology. Only the subsequent exams do. So these are good ones to test the water with and get used to the exam formats. So hopefully on that list you found something that sounds like the right possible path for you and maybe a good first exam. If you didn't see something listed there, I strongly recommend you visit Microsoft.com/learning and you just simply go to certifications by product technology, and you can get a list of all the certifications for different products. Find the one that most closely maps to a product you already know and love. Once you've found that certification, you figure out the first exam in that path, and then now it's time to find the gaps in your knowledge. You don't want to spend time studying what you already know. The first piece of gold is to actually, on the Microsoft.com learning site, is to go to the exam itself. When you click on an exam number, it'll take you to a page and there's a tab called Skills Measured. And that Skills Measured tab will actually give you a list of all the content that's on the exam. It's literally a bullet point list of this is what is on the exam. This is absolutely gold when you're trying to figure out what you need to study. Because what you'll notice is you'll go down the list and say, yeah, I know that, I work with that all the time. Yeah, I know that. And then you'll get to something and go, oh, I've never even touched that feature. Bingo. You've just found one of the gaps. That's the reason we go to the Skills Measured tab, to find out what we don't know. By the way, a couple of tips that I've learned over the years taking these exams. If you see any new features, so something that was added in Server 2012 or added in Windows 8, make a note of it. Think of it this way. I can almost guarantee you it's going to be on the exam. Think of it this way. If you were making an exam on Windows Server 2012, you would have to make sure that somebody who'd worked with Windows Server 2008 for the last 3 years couldn't just walk in and pass a Windows Server 2012 exam, because then it wouldn't really be an exam on Server 2012. It wouldn't be a very valued certification. So how do you make an exam on Server 2012 that somebody on Server 2008 can't pass walking in the door? You have to ask a lot of questions about the new features. It's just the nature of what you have to do to make that certification valuable. So as a result, when you see a new feature listed in the Skills Measured, go read up on it. It will be on the exam. Pretty much simple as that. Another thing I've learned is command line tools. GUI is great for certain tasks, and there's a lot of times we rely on using the GUI to do different things. But frequently, there is a command line tool that can do the same task or automate a particular task. If they mention a command line tool inside your Skills Measured, I can almost guarantee you're going to get at least one question about that command line tool on the exam. I don't know why. Maybe it's because they want to make sure you're aware of the command line tool options. Maybe it's because it's easier to ask command line questions in a multiple choice than to give you GUI options for a multiple choice exam. I don't know why it's the case. I just know it tends to be true. It doesn't mean you need to spend 3 days studying that command line tool. I often find reading up 2 pages on TechNet is good enough. Another great way to find the gaps in your knowledge is to actually take a practice test. There's 2 partners that Microsoft actually works with who create practice tests to help people prepare for exams. there's self-test software, and there's MeasureUp. Now, you do have to pay for practice tests. Personally, I actually find it worth a few bucks to do this because I find I will get a couple more questions right because of the time I've spent with that practice test. And sometimes for me, that makes the difference between a pass or fail. This is my personal experience. You may have a different one, but I find value in those practice tests, and I have spent money on them. What you do is you go through the practice test for the exam you're preparing for, and when you're finished that practice test, it'll actually give you back a score sheet. And it'll actually give you a summary of your score in the different subject areas for the exam. This score sheet is great because it shows you might discover you got 90% of the questions right in one topic area and only 10% of the questions right in another topic area. You're finding out what you don't know. Now you're going to be able to figure out what it is you have to go study so you can study effectively. One thing I will warn you of, for the latest certifications that have just come out, you might go to MeasureUp and maybe you don't find the exam, or it might be on MeasureUp but not on self-test, or it might be on self-test or not on MeasureUp, or it might be on neither of them. It's just a reality that if the exam has only become live, or the exam is still in beta, they can't put out the practice test yet. So just keep an eye out when you are studying for an exam for practice tests. If they aren't there when you're thinking about it, they might be there later. So just keep an eye out. The practice tests do come, but there is a bit of delay between the actual exam going live and practice tests showing up at the partners. I also strongly recommend when you're going through a practice test to use something called study learning mode. What's cool about the study or learning mode is as you do these practice tests that simulate the actual exam, when you choose this mode, it actually, as you do each question, you can choose a Learn Now or Answer Now button. And when you click on that button after each question, it actually shows you whether your guess was right or wrong, and it explains why B was right and A was wrong. So that way, not only are you finding out what you don't know, but you're finding out explanations as to why something's the right answer. So you're kind of studying as you go through and do your practice tests. So you start filling the gaps in your knowledge at the same time as you're finding the gaps in your knowledge. So once we figured out what we don't know through a practice test or by looking at the Skills Measured tab, now we're ready to fill in those gaps. How do you know what to look at? How do you know what to study? The first thing you do is go back to that exam guide. Go to Microsoft.com/learning, find your certification. It'll list the exam number. Click on that exam number and go to the tab called Preparation Materials this time. And that will literally list for you existing content that is there that is relevant to the certification you're working on or relevant to the exam that you're preparing for. So you'll see here, this is an example, this is a Server 2012 tab, and you can see it suggesting there's a learning plan. Right now, there is no e-learning training. There's a Microsoft Pressbook it's recommending. It's saying at the moment there are no practice tests because this is a very new exam and so on. So these are the types of resources that you'll find links to when you're preparing for an exam. So what kind of resources are you going to see listed here? Well, one, you're going to see learning plans. Learning plans are actually created by people who work for Microsoft Learning, and they're basically designed to help you prepare for an exam. So you simply click on the learning plans, they're in this training catalog, and they will point you to white papers, articles, MSDN articles, books, and any content that the learning plan creator thought would help you to prepare for that exam. A number of exams actually have learning plans specifically on what should I go study and do to prepare for this exam. So they're a great resource and they're there for free. Sometimes you'll see links to e-learning. Now generally e-learning courses do cost money, but if you don't have the luxury of taking an in-person course, which of course is a great way to prepare for an exam, then the alternative is you can look at something like e-learning. Sometimes for the latest versions of technology, they might have previews of e-learning that are free. This can be particularly useful for the technologies where there is no in-person training yet. You know, there aren't a lot of courses out there on the latest technologies because it takes a while for the courses to get developed. So you can go find a course tomorrow, Windows Server 2008, but it might be difficult to be able to schedule a course for Windows Server 2012 right now. or maybe difficult to get a course on Windows 8, but not that difficult to get a course on Windows 7. So e-learning can be a good direction to look at if you're trying to get training on a technology and there's no in-person training available. Then there's books. Microsoft Press and other companies do publish books to help people prepare for exams. In fact, there are actual, at the bottom of this list here, Microsoft Press exam guides. So there are some books that are specifically designed to help you study and prepare for an exam. Of course, you'll have to pay for these books, though occasionally, again, there will be some e-books for free from time to time if you keep your eyes open and watch some of the blogs. MSDN and TechNet are fabulous resources when you're studying. When all else fails, when I go to that Skills Measure tab, if I don't have anything else, I look it up on MSDN, I look it up on TechNet, and those are great resources as well. Along with one other feature called Bing. And there are times when I just go do a search and I find a great blog post somebody's written that explains a feature. And sometimes that gives me everything I need to know to get the one question on the exam. Sometimes with the latest exams, there are no resources listed for the exam preparation materials. So now what do? Well, you go back to that Skills Measure tab. You treat that like a checklist. One of the great things to do, go download a trial version of the product, play with it, try out the features yourself to figure out what they do. And for study materials, Bing it. Look up MSDN articles, find TechNet posts, find blog posts. For Windows 8, you can look at dev.windows.com. There's a free ebook out right now for Windows Server 2012. Keep an eye out on the Born to Learn blog. Sometimes they'll post exam preparation sessions or free study materials to help you prepare for the latest exams. Born to Learn is actually a blog maintained by the Microsoft Learning team. Just as a couple of examples, right now there's 2 free ebooks out there, one which is great for preparing for developers on the MCSD, the expert level certification, and another one great for anybody working on the Server 2012 MCSEs. So these are books that you can go download right now. Another great resource you can often find out there are online labs. A lot of the product teams provide either labs that you can launch from your own desktop and are hosted in the cloud, and some product teams actually provide virtual machines that you can download so you can try it out on your own laptops or your own machines and servers. So whatever product you're working with, just go do a search for SharePoint, online labs, or Visual Studio labs. Or in this case, there's actually some server labs that I know of available right now for System Center 2012 and Windows Server 2012. These types of online labs are a great way to walk through and learn some of the latest and newest features. I mentioned the learning plans. These can be a great resource as well. It said they're in something called the Learning Catalog on the Microsoft Learning site. It said, and they will point you to a number of different resources that you can find useful to help you prepare. If you've spent the money on one of those practice tests, I suggest you do one run-through of the practice test to find the gaps in your knowledge, but then I actually run the practice test again to fill the gaps in my knowledge. But what I do is I actually customize the practice test. When you launch a practice test, if you actually look in the test options, you can say, give me all the questions on this topic, or give me all the questions with a particular keyword. So I will do that to fill the gaps in my knowledge, to quiz myself on the features I don't feel as comfortable with or that I feel I need to learn more about. And I'll use that study mode so that as I do each question on that one topic, I click that Learn Now button and get the explanation that explains to me the answers to every question they have on that topic. Then I feel much better prepared when I walk into the exam. So, we've figured out a certification goal. We've found the gaps in our knowledge. Now we've filled some of the gaps in our knowledge. Now it's time to think about taking the exam itself. First of all, before anything else, before you even register for that exam, go to the Microsoft Learning site or just do a search and see if there is what they call a second shot promotion going on. And they are actually doing one right now, so this is a good time to do it. Second shot promotions give you either discounts on second tries or they give you a free second shot at the exam if you failed the first time. This sort of just takes some of the nerves out of it. Sometimes when I get a free second shot, I will actually say, you know what, I'm just going to go take the exam. I'm not even going to study. And I will go take the exam, try it, and you know what, Maybe I pass. It's happened to me a couple of times because I'd already worked with the product a bit and I discovered I could pass the exam without even studying. I would never do that without a free second shot. But having that second shot is with the safety net. It's just this knowing that, well, if I fail it the first time, no stress, no pressure. Now you get a score sheet at the end of the exam that tells you what areas you scored high and low in. Now I know what to go study before I take it for real. So I love that second shot. It's a great promotion. Said there is one on right now. If you register for that second shot promotion before you register for the exam. That's the key. You can't do it after the fact. You can't take it, fail it, and say, "Ooh, I'd like a second shot, please." How do you actually register for an exam? Just one of those little logistics. It's kind of important. You register for exams by going to prometric.com. When you register, you have to choose the testing center where you're going to take your exam. There's a number of training centers across the country where you can take those tests. Your best bet is to go and book a date for the exam and then start studying. Because what I find happens is if you tell yourself, yeah, I'll start studying and then I'll take the exam later this month, or I'll take it at the end of, in December when it's quiet. You'll tell yourself that. And then you'll study for a couple of nights. And then you'll get busy because there's stuff going on. And then January comes around. And you're like, yeah, maybe I'll put off taking that exam until the spring because I've been busy and I haven't had too much time to study as I expected. And you'll find yourself perpetually putting it off. I find if I book the exam and I pick a date, maybe it's in 2 months, maybe it's in 6 months, maybe it's in 3 weeks, maybe it's tomorrow, and I book that exam, now I've got a deadline. Suddenly, I find study time because now there's a deadline, there's a goal for me to meet. So psychologically, that really works for me. I find book the exam, then find time to study. Don't tell yourself to study and then get around to scheduling the exam when you think you're ready. You kind of have to push yourself a little bit. Some of these exams for the latest certifications are still in beta, so you might not be able to schedule them just yet. Most of them will be live by the end of this month. When you actually arrive to take the exam itself, a couple of things to be aware of. You should get to the testing site 15 minutes to 30 minutes before your exam is scheduled to start. You are required to bring photo identification. I recommend getting a good night's sleep. You're better off getting a good night's sleep than trying to cram information in your head till 3 in the morning. It is a closed book exam. You'll be asked to give, any bags and so on, leave them with the front desk, and cell phones must all be turned off. You aren't allowed to bring any paper into the exam, but the testing center administrator will give you a sheet of paper or a pad of paper or a whiteboard sheet that you can bring in with you to the exam, so that if you want to take notes while you're actually going through the exam, you're welcome to do that. One of the things I've done with that occasionally, sometimes I know that on the exam I'm going to have to remember, there was a programming exam where you had to memorize the trace levels, and you had to remember what was trace level 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 1 is informational level, and 2 is warning level, and 3 is error level, or sorry, it's probably the other way around, and 4 is verbose. I think I've gotten them mixed up. It's a while since I took that exam. And you just had to know those 4 different levels. So what I did is I wrote it on a piece of paper, and just before I went to take the exam, when I had to, hand all my stuff to the administrator, I looked over it one more time, crumpled up the piece of paper, and threw it out. Then they handed me my whiteboard page. I walked into the testing room, sat down, and the first thing I did was write it down on the whiteboard page while I remembered it. Nothing wrong with that. Perfectly fair. When you take the exam itself, take the advice of Douglas Adams in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't panic. You will not know all the answers. If somebody gets 1,000 on an exam and gets a perfect score, by the way, it is scored out of 1,000, if people start getting 1,000 all over the place on exams, Microsoft freaks out. They go, hold on, no. You aren't supposed to get 1,000 on this exam. If you're getting 1,000, then we get suspicious that somebody out there has hacked the exam and posted the answer somewhere, and we're going to raise the red flag, and we're going to be doing something about that. So you're not expected to get 1,000. If you do, wow, that's awesome. Go brag about it to your friends. But you shouldn't be getting 1,000 on exams, so you will not know all the answers. So don't panic when you see 3 or 4 questions in a row and you don't know the answer. Never give up. Finish the exam. You never know. There have been a couple of exams where my first 5 questions, every one of them I said, I don't know the answer to this one. I'm going to try C. It's question 2. Uh-oh, I don't know this either. Question 3. Uh-oh, I don't know this either. And you start to panic. And you know what? So far, I've still passed every exam I took, including those ones. So don't panic. Always finish. You never know. You might still pass. There are certain similarities you'll find when you look at different exams. They'll all be somewhere between 40 to 60 questions long. The pass mark is 700, but one of the secrets of Microsoft exams, it's public, but it's not something that's really advertised, is 700 isn't necessarily 70%. What happens is when a new exam comes out, there's a beta period where people can be invited to try out the original version of exam. When you take a beta, you might actually get more questions than the final exam is going to have. So during the beta, what they do is they look at the results of, having 500 people. I don't actually know how many people do the beta, but they get a large number of people to try out the exam. And then based on those results, they might discover, wow, every single person who tried it got this question right. That question's too easy. Let's take it off. Or they might say, wow, nobody got this question right at all. We need to either reword that question or maybe we need to take it out. Maybe it's not well done. So they do this to try and make fair tests. The other thing they might discover is, wow, everybody did really badly on this exam. Maybe we should make the pass mark lower. Or they might say, wow, everybody did really well on this exam. Let's make the pass mark higher. So scoring 700 might actually map to 80%. Or scoring 700 might actually be equivalent to getting 60% on the exam. You will never know. You just know that 700 is the magic number. It generally takes between 1 and 4 hours to complete an exam. How long it takes depends very much on you and the kind of person you are. If you were that person who in school always walked out of the exam room after 25 minutes, it's not going to take you 3 hours to do these exams. If, however, you are that person who, when the teacher was saying pencils down, was thinking, no, I need more time to go back over my answers and check them, then, yeah, it might take you 3.5, 4 hours to do these exams. So it just depends on how you work, whether you're going to go through them quickly or slowly. There are some exams which have some sort of simulations in them where you might get screenshots and you have to click on different hot areas. So expect some of those. There is a requirement that you have to be able to see the entire question and all the answers before you go to the next question. This freaked me out the first time it happened to me. I was looking at a question on the exam, and I knew the answer. And I knew that the answer was A. Give me 1 second here. I just need to close my office door. I'm back. So I was looking at a question. I read the question, and right away I knew the answer. I looked down, and there it was, B. That was the answer. I clicked on it, and I looked at the bottom of the screen, and the next button was actually grayed out. I'm like, oh no, the next button isn't working. What do? I prepped for this exam. I'm here. I'm ready to go, and now the software's not working. Oh my gosh, it's all broken. And then I didn't know what to do, so I moved it around, and I started looking at the question, and the previous button was, I could go previous, I just couldn't go next. And then I realized when I scrolled down with the scroll bar, because a little part of the answer to D wasn't visible on the screen. And the next button won't be enabled unless you can see and you scroll down to the bottom of the last answer. It's just a way of making sure that you have seen all the possible answers before you move to the next question. But it can freak you out the first time if you're not ready for it. When you look down, when you clicked on an answer, you go to click next and it's grayed out. It just means you need to scroll down to the bottom of all the answers before you click next. By the way, another thing, for those of you who do like to go back and review answers, absolutely, you do all the questions, and after the end of the exam, there is an opportunity to go back to any question and change answers. So that's one thing that's nice, gives you a bit of comfort, so it's okay to skip a question, come back to it later when you've done the others. So, you don't need to spend 20 minutes on one question getting stressed, skip it, continue, come back to it later. Another thing that's nice to be aware of is when these exams are developed, there's sort of an 80-80 rule that's applied. The questions on the exam are designed to test you on the 80% of the features used by 80% of the users 80% of the time. Think about it this way. Microsoft isn't out to get you by making these certifications. Microsoft is not trying to make these exams extra hard by asking you all these weird, obscure features. What would be the value of a certification that tested you on obscure features that nobody ever used? The whole point of a certification is it's helping you have job-ready skills that will help you in your work. So of course they're going to be asking you questions about things that you will be using at work. That's where this 80-80 rule comes from. So yeah, you're going to get quizzed on stuff you'll need to know to do your job with this product. So a lot of the stuff you already know is going to be on the exam. When you look at the questions themselves, there is a fairly standard structure you'll start to recognize after a while. Most exam questions will start off with a little background. You are working as an administrator for the Contoso Toy Company. And they'll give you some sort of business scenario. They are planning a migration from Windows Server 2008 to 2012. And then they'll give you a problem state. You need to evaluate the current hardware to see if it meets the necessary requirements. And then you'll have one or more correct, and then they'll say, what should you do? And you'll have one or more correct answers, and then you will have incorrect answers. There are no partially correct answers. There are no trick answers. So A is either right or wrong. B is either right or wrong. Now, having said that, there are different ways they can present the questions. They may give you a multiple choice single answer question, which means they give you A, B, C, or D. B is right. That's it. So one answer is correct. You have to pick the correct answer. Or they might give you a multiple choice, multiple answer question. So they might say, please pick two answers, both of which are correct by themselves. So A, because maybe you can do it with the GUI, or you could do it with the command line. So A might describe how to pick something with GUI, and C might describe how to do it with the command line. They're both correct answers. If that is the case, they will tell you in the question, pick two correct answers, both of which are correct. They may also say, what two things do you need to do to complete this task? So you might need to do A and C together, making a correct answer. So if that is the case, the question will clearly state, pick two answers that together will achieve the desired result, or something to that effect. So they will let you know if two answers together form one answer, or if two answers independently are correct. You may get hot area questions where they show you like a screenshot and you have to click on the right options or choices. You may get drag and drop questions where they give you a design drawing and you have to drag things to the correct area and drop them in the correct area on the other side. They like to give you build, list, and reorder questions. These are the ones where they say, you want to implement search in a Windows 8 app. What should you do? And you see, oh, I need to create the search contract. I need to write a method that will launch my search page and find my search results and so on. And not only do you have to list what you have to do, but you have to put the tasks in the right order as well. There are a few case study questions as well. There's not as many of these as there used to be, but there are occasionally case studies where they'll give you a couple of paragraphs of background, and then you might answer one or more questions about that case study. If they do that, you always have the ability to go back and forth between the case study and the question. So if you ever need to go back and check on something in the case study, you can always go back to it when you're looking at the question. There are a few things and strategies that I've learned over the years to help me be successful when taking the exam. One is eliminate wrong answers. Sometimes you look at the answer and right away you know the correct answer. Great, that's awesome. Click on the correct answer, move on. But if you don't know the answer, if you're not sure, the first thing I start doing is eliminating incorrect answers. Sometimes you might look at an incorrect answer and go, that's just so blatantly wrong. Maybe it's right. No, probably not. Think of it this way. I used to write practice tests. I've never written actual exam questions. I used to write practice tests. And it is really hard to make up wrong answers, basically. It's very difficult to do. So sometimes when we're making up wrong answers, we get a little desperate. So yeah, when you look at that and go, seriously, no one would ever pick that? I'm like, I know, it was the best wrong answer I could think of. So if you don't know the right answer, eliminate the wrong answers and then guess. Maybe at least a 1 in 2 chance or a 1 in 3 chance now instead of a 1 in 4 chance. Play spot the difference. A lot of times A, B, C, and D are very long answers, but when you look at them closely, there's only 2 things that are different across A, B, C, and D. You don't have to understand the whole answer. You just have to figure out what's different and out of those differences, which one would make one the correct or incorrect answer. Sometimes you'll spot two answers and you go, well, those can't both be right. Like, you know, answer A says, set security to public. Answer B says, set security to private. You're like, well, it can't be both of those. When you have those multiple answers situations, that can help you narrow it down. This is another one of those fallbacks. When in doubt, if I have no idea what the answer is and there's a new feature listed, I click on the new feature. Because I know they always have to test me on the new features and they want to highlight what the new features can do. When all else fails, guess. You will not lose points for guessing the wrong answer. So leaving an answer blank and answering wrong both give you 0 points. But if you guess, hey, you might get it right, and that might be enough to take you through to pass. When you are guessing, generally go with your instinct. Your first guess is probably right. And if you really reach a question where you're like, oh, I should know this, I just can't think of it right now, there is the ability in the top right corner when you take the exam to mark a question for review. And then when you reach the end of the questions, you can go back to any of those to spend more time on them when you know how much time you have, or even sometimes you'll get to question 17 on the exam, and something in the question or in the answers helps you remember the correct answer to question 2, the one you were stuck on. So sometimes later questions can give you hints to earlier questions. I just want to show you finish up here by showing you guys a couple of sample questions, just to give you a feel for them, even though I realize that these may be on technologies you don't know, just because I want you to think a bit about the techniques I was talking about there. So this one. You are a database administrator for your company. Your company stores all its product data in a SQL Server 2008 database named Products. Eric, a user in your database, complains he is not able to access the tables created by another user, Adam, through a stored procedure. But Adam is able to access the tables through the stored procedure. You need to ensure that Eric is able to access the data while minimizing excessive permissions. Okay. So what should you do? All right, so the key here, as you look at these answers, you may not work with SQL Server at all, but I'm going to ask you to apply one of the strategies. I'm going to ask you to think, are there any answers here that you can just look at and say, that's got to be wrong, even if you've never used SQL Server? I'm guessing most of you can figure out that C is wrong. If a user is having trouble accessing a table through a program, I'm not going to make them a database owner. That doesn't sound very smart. In fact, if you read the question carefully, it said using the minimum security, let him do it. You would never just grant somebody owner permissions. So C is wrong. If you're a programmer, you probably guess B is wrong. Wouldn't just recompiling a program, that wouldn't fix anything. It's just recompiling the program again. So in this case, you're left with A or D. Should I grant create table to Eric? Again, that sounds a little excessive because he's just trying to get access to a particular program to do something for him. In this case, the correct answer is actually, whoops, my mistake there. My check mark's off. It should be D, ask Adam to recompile the stored procedure with the execute as owner clause. But said, even if you know nothing about SQL Server, I bet you were able to eliminate a couple of the wrong answers. And just to be clear, the correct answer is D, not C. My mistake on my slide there. I moved them from one slide template to another, so the questions are, my check marks are off. Here's another example. You are the administrator of the Viragon Corporation. All workstations have been upgraded to Windows 7. You want to control the DLL files that users are allowed to load on their workstations. What can you do to allow only approved DLL files to be loaded onto workstations? And you get all these different choices. Choose 2 answers. Each correct answer is part of the solution. Okay, I'm a developer. I'm going to be honest with you here. I know nothing at all about Windows 7 installing, configuring, and stuff like this. But look for the new feature. I do know that App Locker was a big new feature that was added in Windows 7. And sure enough, A and B together are the correct answer. So this is where they spot the new feature trick works. One last sample question here. You are the exchange administrator for the Nutex Corporation Exchange 2010. Your company has acquired a state-of-the-art high-definition projector that can be used in meetings. You want to create a mailbox for the projector so that users in the company can request its use. What must you do to create a mailbox with the least number of possible steps? By the way, you'll often see little phrases like this, with the least amount of work, with minimum permissions, fairly common little phrases. And that can sometimes help guide you in the right direction too. So how do I create a mailbox easily for a new projector? Whew, man, that's a lot of stuff. You're going to see questions like this, and you look at this and go, oh my gosh, what a lot of text. Time to play spot the differences. If you actually look closely here, what you discover is the differences between these 4 different answers. There's only a couple of differences. First of all, to A and B say use Active Directory users to create an account, then run a script. A and B say that. C and D just say run the script. So one of the things I need to figure out is, do I have to create an account for the projector first, or can I just run a script to create its mailbox? So that's one thing I have to figure out. If you look at C and D, the only difference between those is one specifies that it is dash equipment, and the other one says dash room. Everything else on the line is exactly the same. Since we're creating something for a projector, I'm guessing dash equipment, even though I have no idea what this command is really doing. I'm not an administrator. But I look at this, I go, well, it's definitely C, not D, because I'm creating a mailbox for a projector. Why would I put dash room if there's a dash equipment? So I would choose going to be C or A, because they both have the dash equipment. Then I'd probably think, well, they did say with the least possible steps. It'd be kind of weird to have to, maybe you have to create the projector account first, but I'm going to go ahead and guess C, which in this case is the correct answer. So I can almost logic it out, even though I don't actually know that product. So just some ways to think about it. Never panic on a question. It's amazing what you can do when you stop to puzzle it out. When you get to the end of the exam, you will have a chance to review questions and change your answers. You'll also, at the very end, you'll be asked to complete an online evaluation at the testing center. The testing centers are required to, keep a certain score in terms of how well they do their job at the testing center. And then after that online evaluation, then you get a pop-up that tells you the magic number. Did you pass? Did you fail? When you finish, you walk out, go to the testing administrator. They will give you a piece of paper which has your score. Do pick that up regardless of whether you pass or fail. If you pass, that's your physical proof that you passed the exam. If you fail, that's where you see your score sheet summary so you know what to study when you go take your second shot. When you do pass, you'll receive an email, and then within a couple of weeks of passing, which gives you your Microsoft certified registration information and some of your certification information. When you pass, are you certified forever? A very common question. The newest certifications, the MCSE and the MCSDs that have come out, do require you to complete a recertification exam every 3 years. This is not unreasonable with service packs and things like Server 2008 came out with this R2. We all know technology changes, so you are required to recertify, if you will, by doing an exam every 3 years to maintain a certification with the newest certifications. So you follow the steps. Pick your certification goal. Find the gaps in your knowledge. Fill the gaps in your knowledge. Then go take that exam. You can go off and get certified, and good luck with that exam.